Webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to REC's Talking Recruitment webinar for February. Lots going on today. We've been all out around the country this week, in Belfast, in Bristol, talking to members. A couple of events this morning in London, and we're watching the Cabinet reshuffle as it happens. So a bit more on that later. But lots to cover today on the webinar. I'm joined today by the REC's Head of Policy.
Hi, I'm Sophie Winfield.
And just before we kick off, well, somebody's confirmed they can hear us already, so I was going to ask you to confirm that you could hear us okay, but we've had somebody drop that into the chat box. If you have any questions as we go along, as always, just drop some questions in, and we'll pick them up as we go. Anything that we can't pick up on the webinar, we'll try and follow up afterwards. Today's agenda, run you through the latest data that we're seeing in the jobs market, bit of an update around policy and regulatory changes upcoming, clearly IR35 and some of the recruitment law changes associated with Good Work Plan are dominating discussion at the moment, so we'll touch on that. A little bit of an update on some of the REC's campaigning work, and then we're very pleased to welcome Alex Sherrado from LinkedIn, who's going to do a bit of an introduction to some of the trends they're seeing in how recruiters are using LinkedIn to improve productivity in the business in terms of interactions with candidates and understanding how their business is operating. So without further ado, let's move on to looking at some of the data that we are seeing from the REC's Jobs Outlook and Report on Jobs. So as we look at the data, many of you who've been on the webinars before will know that 2019 could be summed up as a low and slow kind of year. Temp doing okay. Perm quite a lot slower. Employer outlook basically flat on their own business, but pretty negative about the employment outlook for the wider economy, and you see that here in the jobs outlook data. But what's telling is we've had quite a significant bounce back since December. Now that could be a bit of certainty, either any perceived challenges from party manifestos or moving through Brexit and into the transition period. The big question really is, to what extent is this a bit of a sugar rush because we've got a bit of certainty, or how is it going to persist, especially in the context of a global market where places like China were already slowing down even before the coronavirus, which has shut their factories for the last couple of weeks, and that will start to affect clients in manufacturing over the next couple of weeks, because of course the supply chain will begin to get stretched. So we're watching that quite carefully. But broadly, the news is better than the last time we were together. The surveys have definitely picked up in confidence. And when we look at report on jobs, Sophie, I think that's borne out.
Yeah, and so you can definitely see here that the uptick. In terms of recruitment activity, it's increased in December and January. However, we have noticed a slight fall in the temporary billings, and one of the reasons that we're sort of thinking that this might be is the upcoming IR35 reforms due in April this year. So whilst permanent placements have increased, it's those temporary billings that we've seen sort of slightly fall, and it'd be interesting to see if that sort of resonates with you. In terms of demand for staff, this has picked up at the start of 2020, but staff availability continues to fall, and that availability has been, it predates Brexit. It's since May 2013, so it's still a high concern for our members, is the lingering kind of uncertainty and shortage of EU workers and candidate shortages.
So you think if we look at this, the picture is one that maybe we've recognised over the last few years of a progressively tightening labour market. That may well be driven further by sort of lower flow of workers into the country just in the uncertain period before the new immigration system comes in, but also depending on what the design of that is. I think it's emphasising, as I said in my remarks to the the Recruitment Agency Expo last week, that candidate experience is going to become progressively more important as a differentiator in this market with lots and lots of tight and difficult to fill, potentially difficult to fill roles. But obviously that's also an opportunity for the industry. And if we look at our publication of the Recruitment Industry Trends Survey in January, which is the survey we publish once we've got all of the 2018-19 results for members, so those who closed their books in April as well as those who closed their books in December. And as you can see here, the industry grew again to £38 billion in total turnover. You'll recognise that the majority of that is always from temporary and contract. Employment numbers high, permanent placements well over 1 million, and average daily number of temporary and contract workers all well over 1 million. And I think that's a great calling card when you're talking to clients, when you're talking to other parties about what we do as an industry. 1 million people into new jobs every year, and 1 million people into workplaces as temps every day is a fantastic. It is a fantastic statistic within the sector employing over 100,000 people as well. A really significant bit of the British economy. And if we talk about how we are, if we talk about how we are representing the industry at a time when services is going to matter, we're talking to the government now about how services are written into the EU free trade agreement, so you can do business across Europe. The fact that this is a almost £39 billion sector, employing 120,000 people and changing 1 million jobs, 1 million people every year into new jobs, that's a really great way of introducing the value of what we do. So if we think about this data in context, I think there's something here about the scale of the industry, but also the pressure, the highly competitive nature of the industry, given the pressure from a tight labour market, and also from the fact that we know that the number of firms grew again last year. So in doing that, I think differentiation, again, candidate experience, understanding clients, all those themes that we've talked about in the past seem to be getting more important, not less important, as we go into 2020. I did a session at the Recruitment Agency Expo all about this, and about 5 things that are really important for recruiters to think about in their business plan. As you do that, do have a look at the blog that we'll publish next week, where I'll be writing that up and publishing it on the REC website. Just some analysis from us about how you take forward thinking about the shape of this industry going into 2020. But we can't put the fact that there's some big changes afoot off for too long. So let's start by looking at some of the new legislation that's coming into force in 2020. And Sophie, do you want to? Do you want to take us into this?
Yeah. So first we have a poll question which is, which of the following changes from April 6, 2020 were you aware of, or are you aware of? So the options are holiday pay reference period changes from 12 to 52 weeks, repeal of pay between assignments, key information document for all workers, and written statement for all workers. So we'll just leave that open while people vote. Had about 40% voted. We'll just keep it open a little bit longer. And you can tick all that apply. So all of the ones that you have heard of out of those 4 pieces of legislation changes.
Let's close it off there. It's got higher turnout now than last Sunday's Irish general election. And if we look at the numbers, the key information document, 80%, clearly that's the one that applies to the most to most of you, and there are some challenges around it which we'll go on to discuss. Holiday pay reference period, 60%. Written statement, 65%. Repeal of pay between assignments, 43%. Now that might be down to the fact that only a few sectors heavily use PBA. But on all of these, I think I want to emphasise that there's lots of material available on the REC website and by the REC team here to help you navigate this. I know we're looking at doing some work with the TUC on how you transition workers from pay between assignments, Sophie.
Yeah, we'll be doing a fact sheet for agency workers with the TUC to sort of make sure they're aware of their rights going forward as well. So in terms of the recruitment law changes, these were all announced as part of the Good Work Plan. So the government announced the Good Work Plan in December 2018. Some of this legislation is already in effect. So that is that all workers must receive an itemised payslip. That came into effect last year, as did the increase of fines for aggravated breaches of employment rights to £20,000. So the legislation coming into effect from this April the 6th, which is not applicable in Northern Ireland, is, as was on the poll, the end of pay between assignment clauses, a written statement from day one, a key information document, and you can see the example there of a key information document and the increase of the holiday pay reference periods. Now, in the next few slides, we've got quite a lot of information. This is where you can find the documents to help you in your preparations for these upcoming changes. So we've got a Good Work Plan hub. Obviously, we will talk about these changes at upcoming sector meetings, and we have some legal and policy webinars. And if you have further questions, please do get in touch with the policy team. The government's also provided some guidance, which we have fed into on the key information document, on holiday pay, and the repeal of Swedish derogation. And we've put the links there so it is accessible. The next few slides go into each of these in slightly more detail. So we can skip through some of this. But it's so that you have the information available when you when we send out the slides. So obviously, in terms of Swedish derogation, the thing to note here is that for workers on Swedish derogation contracts, by no later than the 30th of April, an agency worker must receive a written statement from their temporary work agency confirming that they're entitled to equal pay from the 6th of April onwards. So I think that's the key bit of information here. In terms of the written statement, so written statement is part of the Employment Rights Act 1996, and it's been updated to include all workers should also be must be given a written statement on day one of employment. We'll be having guidance on how this can be done for agency workers, and the specific information that must be provided is in the list here. So it's quite a lot of the some of the information overlaps with the conduct regs information, but some of it is actually more specific as well. On the key information document, which is also coming into effect from the 6th of April, so work seekers must receive a key information document before terms are in place, and it must be a separate document. There in the legislation, it's very specific about how that information is provided to workers. It be no longer than 2 sides of A4, and the guidance contains within it a sort of example of how it can be done, which is pictured there. And it's the kind of primary reason that the government have done this is to address the lack of transparency around who is responsible for paying workers, and also the confusion that workers have sometimes had in the actual amount that they receive. So that should, given that supply chains are more complex now, so this is the start of them trying to make sure that what workers are paid is transparent.
And it's worth noting at this point that while the rest of these are all just does not apply in Northern Ireland, the key information document also doesn't apply in the GLA licensed sectors, and that's because there are GLA processes in place already there, so you don't have to double up on what the GLA are asking you to do. You just need to make sure that you're using the KID in situations where the GL, where you're not supplying into the GLA sector.
And one thing to kind of be aware of is even where the work seeker opts out of the conduct regulations, the employment business must provide a key information document, and that is quite important.
And one final one.
Yep, so the final one is the holiday pay reference period. So that is the method for which calculating holiday pay, and it will be extended from 12 to 52 weeks. So it doesn't change any of the entitlement to holiday, it changes the reference period only. And BEIS will shortly be publishing that guidance.
So 4 significant bits of legal change there that are well worth spending some time on, making sure you understand the impact to your business. Deliberately pulled them out separately to IR35, which is clearly the biggest issue that we talk to members about at the moment. But some of the process changes that are required here can be quite significant in individual businesses. So well worth thinking about. Getting in touch with our team if you have any questions. And we are running events around the country, which we'll reference later on to help with further detail. Now, just before we move on, having said none of this applies in Northern Ireland repeatedly, I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on what is happening in Northern Ireland, because clearly the Assembly and the Northern Ireland government has now been restored. We've written to Diane Dodds, the new Economy Minister, particularly on 2 grounds. One, the law has moved on quite significantly in Great Britain since the Assembly was last together, and under the previous Assembly, the practice was usually just to Northern Irelandise the laws that Britain was pushing through, Northern Ireland being the only part of the UK with devolved employment law. That we suspect would be the preference of the DUP Minister for the Economy, but it's very notable in the agreement that brought the Assembly back that greater variability in some aspects of employment is predicted in the agreement. Particularly, they talk about the possibility of having a Northern Ireland specific minimum wage. So there's a question there about what that path would be. If you're operating in Northern Ireland, we had our NI forum yesterday. Do get engaged with David, who looks after Northern Ireland for us at the REC. Contact him via your account manager, but also we're very happy to keep you up to date on everything that's happening in every part of the UK. And as it was raining when we did the slides together, here's a nice sunny picture of the Giant's Causeway to cheer you all up. And that's enough cheeriness. Let's talk about IR35. So we separated this out because clearly it's the biggest single issue. Some of you will have seen the major protest by contractors yesterday to protest the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid. We have been working really hard on this, and it's a difficult one for the REC because we have to do 2 things at once. We have to support you to get ready, and we also have to continue campaigning to make sure any changes that do happen are sensible. At the moment, we would advise any business to be preparing for it to happen in April. Notwithstanding the change of Chancellor today, Rishi Sunak is going to be the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. There was quite a lot of noise around it during the election campaign, which led to quite a limited review being announced by the government. That review has already made some changes. The most important one of them is here on the right, which is about the change would only apply to services provided on or after the 6th of April, not for payments. We've been very clear with government, and we will be very clear again with the new Chancellor, that the scope of this review isn't broad enough. The need to deliver on things like umbrella company regulation before going ahead is absolutely essential. So we will be pushing right up to the budget on the necessity for a slightly different approach. The team here is working really hard. There's a load of documents coming online later this week and into next week with some guidance. Model contracts we will produce as soon as we possibly can. Part of the problem is we can't produce a model contract until we've seen the Finance Act. So as soon as possible after the budget, but we'll try and give you some steers before then. Largely up until now, our public affairs work has mostly been about getting a message across. You can see some of the recent media coverage we've had. On the left here is coverage of 14 of the largest members of the REC and the REC chair writing to Sajid Javid a couple of weeks ago. Lots of coverage in the FT and elsewhere. We've had a really good month on media, and I think it's really important that we're active and out there for you. And making the point on IR35 in particular, which is none of this is about tax evasion. It's all about a system which works for you and for contractors, and this isn't it right now. It would have been nice to, after the 1 year delay, to roll through into IR35 changes this April, but government had work it needed to do to deliver that, and it hasn't done that work. So we will remain robust in the public square on all of that. But we will continue to do everything we can to help you prepare for change if it does come. So let's go to poll question 2 at this point, and we're just really interested in your view on what IR35 as planned at the moment might do in your view with the contractors and the clients that you work with. So let's go live on this question of what's the biggest impact IR35 will have on the private sector. Okay, so that poll's open now for you to vote. And we're seeing the responses coming in. 62% voted already. So good turnout today.
Yeah.
Politicians would kill for that level of turnout. 72% voted already. Let's close it off there. And pop the result up. There we go. Probably not a surprise that market exit is leading the way. I had a session with some of the REC's largest members this morning, and certainly there was discussion about work being outsourced, as in to contractors in places like Switzerland, but also people leaving the market. If you look at the Stop IR35 campaign, there's lots of evidence there of businesses closing down. We do expect current plans to encourage a drive to umbrella, and 29% of you agree. And the overall reduction of use of contractors is high there as well. I think that's probably right. There is a spate of clients taking blanket decisions to roll things inside IR35. There's some content on the REC website. I've done a little video on a blog on 5 reasons why blanket doesn't really work, if you would like to use that when discussing things with your clients. But there's clearly those 3 things are well ahead of more use of MSPs, and we will and they reflect our expectations. Okay, I can pop the slides back up on the screen. And here's what our team here would say is your action planning checklist if you're feeling a little bit behind the curve on this and getting yourself going. Clearly, audit current use and the supply chain. Remember, there's some supply chain liability involved in the change. Discuss early with clients. There's lots of REC material you can use to help you do that. I think you need to be thinking about whether there are potentially increased costs, and I think as part of that, not just increased costs, but think about the impact on cash flow in the moment of the change, which will require some planning for many of you. And fourthly, then obviously the process steps that you have to take. There's lots more on this on the REC website in terms of what we're doing and in our sessions around the country in terms of template contracts, exempt company declarations, status determination statements, but also all of that accessible alongside the REC's IR35 hub. So lots and lots there that will be coming to you as soon as we can deal with produce things that we have certainty in going forward. Now, I know a number of questions have come in on IR35 while I've been talking. What we'll do is we will move on to the next section on our policy update and what's going on, and I will come back with some questions and some answers to those in the next break. Sophie, do you want to give us a sense of the policy and political agenda going forward?
Yes, so as you all know, on 31st of January, we officially became a third country, leaving the EU. So for the most part this year, there'll be trade talks with the US and other priority countries at the same time as the next stage of Brexit negotiations, just to discuss the future relationship with the EU. As we've briefly touched upon, we have a cabinet reshuffle, so it's no longer rumoured, it is a cabinet reshuffle which is going on at the moment. The two key positions that have changed for us are the Chancellor, which is Rishi Sunak, and Alok Sharma has become the BEIS Secretary of State and also in charge of COP26. So we know that the budget will happen on the 11th of March. So that is another key moment for us on IR35. That is when we will know the draft finance bill and be able to sort of see what the Finance Act will contain and whether IR35, if they've done any changes to that. Also in March, we are expecting the government pledged to bring forward legislation on immigration in this period. Now, we will go into immigration in a minute following the Max report. But we are expecting a response from the government in March. It looks likely that this will be in the form of a white paper. That should be by the end of March. Then on the political agenda, we will have a new Labour leader announced in April, at the beginning of April, on the 4th. And obviously, towards the end of the year, we've got the end of transition period, and the new immigration system is planned to go live on the 1st of January 2021, although that is an incredibly ambitious target. We had the Queen's speech at the end of last year, but it's unclear at the moment whether all the measures in the Queen's speech are aimed to be delivered in this calendar year. So they haven't sort of said whether, so the last Queen's speech was for 2 years, and it's unclear with this one whether it will be for this calendar year or if it will go on a little bit longer because of Brexit.
Well, thank you, Sophie. So there seems to be a big agenda for this government. I think that today's reshuffle is quite a sweeping one, and I think it's meant to deliver a bit of reinvigoration to the government. Having said that, Brexit is not over, and so a lot of government energy will still be focused on that. Indeed, we've had government on the phone asking us for advice on services in trade agreements, because clearly they want to ask services like recruitment about what they need So there's lots of work to do. I think really critical that we as an organisation are really focused in what we ask for, and in a moment I'll go on to some of those key topics that we're working on. Before we do that, I just want to come back to 3 or 4 of the questions that were posed during the IR35 session and the Good Work Plan session. So lots of reports of clients doing blanket judgments. We absolutely hear that. Best, you can't force their hand, but best to educate why blanket isn't necessarily the right choice. We have seen examples of REC members who've walked back blanket decisions. On the key information document and whether it applies to existing workers, I think it applies to each contract as it starts. So when a new engagement starts for a temp, that's when you would issue the KID after the 6th of April. In terms of whether the status of Northern Ireland for workers based in the UK, it's the place of employment that counts. So workers who are employed in GB and just doing a bit of work, in Northern Ireland would be covered by GB law. But if you've got the whole of a placement in NI law would apply. The other thing is, and this was raised, I entirely appreciate that people want IR35 model contracts immediately. What we are doing with our documentation is giving you as much as we can with certainty that should be in your contract. What we do not want to do is to give you a model contract that could well be wrong and expose you to risk. So if you are seeing model contracts done for IR35 now from other places, you need to be aware that they may be wrong. And the REC, we want to keep you right. So what we will do is we will give you a load of documentation that tells you where your contracts should be now with clear guidance and as close to a draft as we can give you. But the final contracts we will give you when we know that they're legal. And that's, I think, really important to the standing of the industry and to our standing. I know how frustrating that is, but that's the nature of where we are on government's constant delay in actually getting some certainty on what's happening. If people want to talk that through with me, I'm very happy to spend time on it.
And then we've just had one other question on clarification about how far in advance of a contract being issued we need to issue the key information document. And now the government haven't been specific, they just need the worker to be informed before. So that key information document needs to be provided to the worker before they sign up, but there's no kind of level of time.
Good. We should make some progress. There are a number of other questions we'll try and come back to as we go through. We mentioned that we need to keep ourselves focused. These are the 4 themes that we set out in our manifesto for the election. We will keep pushing at. So it's showing that flexibility and good work go hand in hand, that temporary work and flexible work of various forms is not bad work, really making that case, demonstrating how recruitment contributes to growth. Really focusing on the business environment and how we can make it easier for you to do business, and then taking a lead on the future of jobs, mostly because we want to support you and the whole industry in achieving a more central place in the thinking of clients. And the 500 members now of the Good Recruitment Collective are really important to helping us to do that. So just swiftly, Sophie, do you want to give us an overview of where we think we're up to with immigration? I think particularly for perm recruiters, but also for people working in sectors where the high percentage of temps have traditionally come from the EU, this is an important issue and one where we have a limited amount of time to reach a conclusion.
Yeah, so this is just a quick reminder of what was in the Conservative Manifesto. So they have pledged that the freedom of movement will stop at the end of this year, so that is December 2020, and they will bring in an Australian-style points-based immigration system which prioritises English language, level of education, and people must be law-abiding. They've also pledged that there will be fewer lower skilled migrants, and the overall numbers will come down. So they asked the MAC, which is the Migration Advisory Committee, to look at how we would be able to implement an Australian-style points-based system. And so the MAC reported their key recommendations on the 28th of January this year. And these are some of the recommendations that they have made to the government. So they're independent and they make recommendations to the government. So they think that the Tier 2 framework should continue. However, the resident labour market test should go. And the minimum...
Which is resident labour market test, that's when you have to demonstrate you've done a domestic search.
Yes. And then the minimum salary requirement for Tier 2 should be reduced to about £25,000 for experienced workers, and there will be minimum salaries set for each specific job. And I think, contrary to media reporting, there should be a single national salary threshold rather than regional salary thresholds, and this is something we kind of support.
Although that's obviously going to be a political challenge that comes in from the devolved governments in the process of doing that. There's a question here about the extent to which, alongside this, we might do something in the free trade agreements that we do with different countries. And there is actually in the trade code a thing called GATS Mode 4, which allows that to happen. I would anticipate a large number of countries would want immigration, or particularly access for skilled staff, to be in the trade deal. Most obviously India, but I think it's almost certainly going to be in US trade negotiations. The one thing I would say is trade deals take years to do. Do not anticipate that we will have a trade deal with the US by the end of the year. But there are also going to be interesting things around youth mobility schemes, return of the working holiday visa. So there'll be different sources of candidates coming in alongside that as part of this new system.
Yeah.
So this just summarises what the MAC said. So you've got the details on the direction of travel.
Yeah, I think the key thing for us is that on the temporary route, so the government had in their previous white paper that a temporary route should be included. However, the noises coming from government are a bit more unsure about this route now. And the MAC have pushed this back onto the government and have said that if the government is concerned about impacts for medium and low skilled workers, they should perhaps consider something like the temporary route. So that is something we're keeping an eye on.
And in terms of our representation, I think the most important thing is if you believe in the free trading Britain that was part of the Brexit promise, then you need an open and managed immigration policy, very clearly evidence-based. So we're pushing all of the data you saw at the top of the webinar around how tight the labour market is and shortages, not just for highly skilled staff or just in healthcare and IT, but across the economy, including labour shortages in some key sectors of the economy where we're looking for a temporary work route for people to come in. We'll stick with that. It's going to be basically the next 6 months probably where the design of the system's happening, because it will take at least 6 months to roll the system out. And if any of you want to feed in your own experiences, or you want to give us a steer on what would work for you, Sophie, I think the team will be working closely with members throughout the year.
Yeah.
Super. Now there are one or two very specific questions on the chat page around timing for handing things over in the exempt company declaration. Of course, we'll come back to individuals who've asked those questions offline. Lots of that detail is on the website and in the links that we shared earlier, so it's all there for you, but we'll ping an email to those who've asked specific questions. There's a question here about whether differentiated immigration approach for Scotland as proposed by the Scottish Government. At the moment, we'll say what I've always said, which is a nationally differentiated immigration approach will happen over the dead body of the Home Office, and that still seems to be the case. I think the salary threshold point is the thing that it will turn on, because clearly salary levels vary very widely around the country, and I would anticipate that for the moment the chances of a significantly differentiated system for Scotland are relatively limited. And alongside all of that, there's definitely a commitment to continuing to take forward the outcomes of the Good Work Plan. There's some issues here that we've highlighted for the employment bill and some additional changes. And leave these ones with us, I think, is the message. We are on top of them. I think umbrella regulation is a particular focus. I spoke at an event this morning with TUC and a few others, and there's a lot of pressure on how we make sure where umbrellas are used, they're used. We use ones which are compliant both in tax and employment legislative, on both tax and employment legislative basis. So expect this. And my main message to you about the Johnson government is really that they are going to be interventionist. This isn't a kind of laissez-faire Thatcher Major style Conservative government. They genuinely believe that they've got a mandate to be more interventionist. All those seats in the north that they took in the general election in the north of England, they see as a mandate that they have to deliver on. So we should expect them to continue to have that kind of agenda. Now, just before we move on to hear from Alex, a little bit on the latest from our Future of Jobs work. Just yesterday we published this, which is a paper about how the future work differs regionally. We're doing some regional events around the country through the spring. Lots and lots of evidence that regional jobs ecosystems are beginning to emerge because businesses are growing, and sectors and areas are growing from areas of strength they already have. There's clearly a challenge there in terms of low candidate availability and also increased levels of regional leadership on issues like good work and skills, like in Manchester with the Manchester Career Service or the Good Work Charter, LEP's taking a lead in large parts of the country. There's a real potential for recruiters to get a source of competitive advantage out of engaging with that because so many of the people around the table will be your clients, and those clients are looking for expertise. So if you think back to the work we did last summer to give you regional data on the labour market, that is a tool for building strategic relationships with clients. And this document is just a summary of some of the things that we found as we've looked around the country. It's available on the website now for you to have a look at. And if you would like to think about what all this means for the future of recruitment, we are partnered with LinkedIn to do a series of events around the country during the spring. Manchester next week, Birmingham, Edinburgh and Cambridge in March. And if you can't make any of those or couldn't make Bristol yesterday, do join us for the webinar, which is on the 8th of April. Sophie, is there any questions you'd like to pick up?
Yeah, there's just one other about the key information document about who this applies to. And this actually, it applies to PAYE workers, but also umbrella and PSC. So there are several different templates for different workers. And as I say, one of the reasons is to aid that transparency, particularly when umbrellas are in the supply chain.
Fantastic. So lots there, well worth getting a hands on a copy, useful for supporting some discussions with clients. Message so far today is we're in the trenches for you in Westminster and Whitehall on IR35, on regulation, working hard with this new government, making a noise in the media. Lots and lots coming through on the website and from the legal team to prepare the way for what happens in April, but also thinking about the future of the sector. And and we'll work through that. Now, as part of that future of recruitment work, we're partnered with LinkedIn. Very pleased to welcome Alex Sharado to the webinar today. Alex looks after recruiters for LinkedIn, and as part of our discussion around the future of recruitment, we felt it'd be interesting for him to share a little about how recruiters are driving value from working with LinkedIn. So Alex, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Neil. Much appreciated for the introduction there. And thank you, Sophie, for sharing those insights.
And over to you.
Wonderful. So as Neil mentioned, I work at LinkedIn. I've been at LinkedIn for the past 7 years, and I manage part of our enterprise business here out of London. So we work with recruitment organizations that will tend to have somewhere between 20 to about 300 employees, and partner very closely with our teams based out of Dublin and our global accounts teams as well. So hopefully today we'll be able to give you a bit of a high level view over some of the things we're seeing changing within the marketplace. And I think it fits in quite nicely with some of the points that Neil made earlier around some of the change in competition and the evolution of the world of recruitment in this time and age. So if that's all right, if we could just pop onto the next slide, please, Neil. So I thought it'd be worthwhile just looking at a bit of a higher level, some of the ways in which LinkedIn think about helping recruitment organizations to build a valuable company. And fundamentally, it boils down to these 3 key components. The first one is helping recruitment organizations to grow their top line, help them to ensure that they're managing their costs in the best possible way, and that they're driving productivity per person within their organization. And finally, it's around creating something unique within that business that will add value to that organization, should they come to sales, should they come for an MBO, or just if they want to generate more revenue as an organization more broadly. So when we think about how we add value to these companies within the recruitment sector, these 3 key components come into play. And hopefully, if you go to the next slide, we're going to just run through at a very high level how we can help organizations within the recruitment sector today. But before I go into sort of the hows and the whys and the with whats, I thought it might be worthwhile zooming out and just talking a bit about LinkedIn and where we're at today. So if you jump onto the next slide, please. The mission of LinkedIn is very much to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. And when we think about this as our mission, it's a ginormous, lofty goal that we've set ourselves. And the way that we keep ourselves honest is by measuring that consistently. And if we jump to the next slide, we'll just talk through the different pillars that we use to measure our trajectory, I suppose, within that big ambition. And today we've got over 675 million members. Specifically within the UK, there are over 28 million members in the UK now. Globally, 30 million companies have got a digital representation within our platform, and we're posting about 20 million jobs at any given moment within our systems. Members on our platform have self-identified with about 36,000 individually coded skills, and we have 90,000 higher education bodies who are helping their students to build their skills within our platform and then move out into the wider world. Actually, recent graduates is one of our fastest growing demographics within the platform. I suppose how this relates back to the world of recruitment, with 30 million companies on the platform vying for the attention of the 675 million members and trying to entice them with 20 million jobs, recruitment organizations really have a very active role to play in making this ecosystem work. In all fairness, what better place can you go to find a job opportunity than a recruitment agency who will have their fingers on the pulse, and they'll have a wide array of opportunities for our members to be more successful in their future careers and endeavors. So if you jump onto the next slide, we know for a fact that, whilst we're trying to help these recruitment organizations to be successful, there are so many different things happening in the outside world, and the recruitment industry is changing super quickly. There's more competition than ever before. Neil, you alluded to it earlier in terms of the number of new businesses that are sprouting up every single day. There are external threats, be it within the market, be it within the wider economy. Skills are changing dramatically, and actually the need for certain skills and the demand for these niche skills is growing ever faster. And we know that today, to retain the best quality staff, you need to really focus in on employee engagement for your business and have the right sort of tools in place to make sure they're being productive and successful themselves, to make them want to turn up today and turn up tomorrow, and so on and so forth. Just jump on to the next slide, please. And so many of these challenges, so much of these opportunities, really, we can look at data as being one of the key facets to help to unlock potential within the recruitment sector and within recruitment businesses. Fundamentally, having the right access to information helps you to drive your efficiencies within your business, achieve results that are better and quicker, and help you to make better strategic decisions and smarter choices for your organization. If we jump to the next slide, we'll just quickly touch on, some of the key areas where I suppose at the moment, most recruitment organizations don't have access to that data at their fingertips. Their CVs that they have within their filing cabinets or within their CRM systems are getting out of date. It's really hard to track people's skills as they develop and they evolve. The information they have is in different formats, which means it's hard to understand what's happening within that, hard to interpret that information. And fundamentally, each system you're operating within probably won't talk to each other, which means that you've got information sitting in silos which you can't break into or can't look to cross-reference. And if we look at the next slide, it'll just quickly highlight some of the key challenges that are effectively barriers to entry when it comes to accessing good quality data. We produced a report in 2018, our Global Recruiting Trends Survey, and it said that poor quality data was the #1 challenge that recruitment organizations face when it came to, I suppose, unlocking the value of data and insight within their organization to help them to be more productive. So I suppose where this fits into the world of LinkedIn, and if we jump to the next slide, where this fits into LinkedIn's world today, it very much is around how do we give organizations the right information, the right insight, the right data to be able to drive their organization further? How can we help them to build the right strategy for their business? Because we know for a fact that this will help us to unlock additional growth, will help them to hopefully drive efficiencies in their organization, and could potentially be a key differentiator when it comes to their competitors within the market space. And this really comes back to, again, having a professional profile within the platform. And as mentioned before, 675 million people have chosen to put their profile within LinkedIn. And these individuals are people that you can find. You can have access to these people by partnering with LinkedIn in the best possible ways. But we want to take this one step further and not just look at how you can have access to people. If we click on to the next slide, it really is less about just having access to these members, but it's about truly understanding who these people are within the ecosystem and understanding how you as a recruitment business can help them to achieve their future ambitions and goals. What sort of data and insight can we potentially provide to you about their educational backgrounds, how they're adding new skills to their profile, where they're moving to and from, whether or not they're interested in new job opportunities, how active are they within the platform, what thought leadership have they produced and interacted with recently that means that they're potentially open to future opportunities with your organization. And this kind of level of data and access to insight has really shifted the conversations we're having today with our customers from a conversation around, I just want to get in touch with someone, to I need to find the right people who can help our customers' businesses to develop and to grow. And finding those people will be the differentiator for us in this ever-changing and more competitive marketplace. And if we jump onto the next slide, it just really is hopefully here to illustrate, I suppose, the overarching reach that we have within LinkedIn today. So when we think about the number of people who are visiting LinkedIn on a regular basis, the scale that we have today is pretty unparalleled, certainly within the other platforms where you might be looking at either attracting talent from or advertising job opportunities today. So taking it one step further in terms of what this data allows you to do, and if we jump onto the next slide, it's really to understand in that first instance, who are the key audiences you want to interact with? Who are the people you need to reach out to? How do you get in touch with those individuals? The next part is around engagement. Thank you. Engagement. And how do we drive the right types of engagement and understand how people are interacting with our organization within LinkedIn's ecosystem? And finally, the last part is around the intent data. And that's really understanding where people are moving towards, what are their aspirations and hopes, and how are they interacting with information that flags up to our recruitment team that these people might be open to opportunities in the future. By using these types of data sets and overlaying that with the rich data we have around that identity piece, really allows people to be more efficient within LinkedIn and find the best possible talent for themselves and for their customers. So at a very high level, I mean, this is just a very quick overview, and I appreciate, on the back of the deep insight we've been shared this morning from Neil and Sophie. And if anyone does have further questions, I'd love to be able to answer those at some point in the future. Or if you were to reach out to Neil and the team, they can forward your questions on to myself, and I can make sure that the right person gets back to you to talk about how we can help you specifically to help grow that top line, managing your cost base effectively and drive efficiencies within your business, and then to create that unique brand which helps to attract people to you and makes your business more valuable.
Thank you very much, Alex, and we'll pick up on any questions that come in on the chat side. But I think what's really telling from what you shared there is that theme of differentiation and how you differentiate as a recruitment business really comes through, and it's not just volume of candidates or access to candidates, it's that it's the candidate journey. And when I talk to clients more and more, it's how do I make sure I give candidates a candidate journey with my recruitment partner that really makes sure I get the right people to the front door and into the interview room, but also then supports them into the company in a really positive way. If they're perm, to stay for a long time. If they're temps, just to make sure that they have the right experience and stay the full length of the contract. We know that some of our big blue collar suppliers are investing in candidate experience just as much as the perm businesses now, because if you're supplying a food manufacturing plant, if you can supply one person that stays for 3 months rather than do the job 3 times because of as you have some turnover, that's much higher efficiency for the firm. It's a better experience for the candidate, and it's much better for the client as well in terms of productivity. So I think that whole piece about candidate experience that you've alighted on there in a competitive market is absolutely spot on. We're very happy to facilitate any contact any of you would like with the team at LinkedIn on the back of that pen pick of how some firms are beginning to use LinkedIn as a partner. Just to finish off before we close off at the top of the hour, a few things to draw your attention to. I just answer one question that we've had in the chat box around the number of new recruitment businesses that we've seen in 2019. Our RIT survey measures the total number of businesses. We think there was a 2% rise last year in the number of businesses to 31,000 businesses offering recruitment. Now, obviously, a lot of those are single-handers, but as you can see from that number, still a very competitive space as we were discussing earlier. Now, governance is important, and I know it doesn't float all of your boats, but I need to draw your attention to the fact that the REC Council has made some proposals for changing how the REC is governed. And they're primarily designed to simplify how we're governed and make the member voice louder and more engaged in holding the business to account and making sure we're delivering to you. The main things that the main proposal is to create a smaller board for the REC, who would primarily be tasked with running the REC as a business as non-execs, and to whom I would be answerable, alongside maintaining a council for advisory on the purpose of the REC and the work plan and critical policy calls. There are links here to the consultation document. It's quite an easy read. We are in consultation for the next few weeks just to make sure that these proposals that have been approved by the council are acceptable to the wider membership. Do take a look. Do get in touch with us if you have any feedback. If all is well, we will call an extraordinary general meeting for March on the 25th, where we would hope to make these changes and they'd be effective from our AGM in June. I know governance is not always the most exciting thing in everyone's life, but I think really important to emphasise that this is all about the REC being as member-centric as we possibly can be going into this new decade. And my experience after 18 months of the job is I really want to make sure that our service to you is at the heart of everything we do, and this new board is going to be vital to delivering that. Finally, in the slide pack, some key upcoming events you might like to engage with. You want a deeper dive on the legal changes we've been discussing today, series of events around the country this month and next month, Peterborough, Edinburgh, Leicester, London, Birmingham, and back in London again. Those are the remaining ones. We've already been in the Northwest and other places around the country. You're able to book online via Cvent for all of those now. Our big conference this year on the 4th of June, fantastic line up there. We'll be publishing that in the next few days, a real date for the diary. We're also running some business growth seminars if you'd like to network with peers and get some challenge and advice about competing in this market, one in Warrington in March, another in Luton in May, and the national and regional forums where we get together and discuss the local issues. RAC Cymru's meeting this year is on the 5th of March. David will be hosting RAC Scotland's meeting on the 12th of May, and the South and Midlands meetings are there for you as well. And finally, our usual slew of Q1 and 2 sector meetings here in London. We're making a move to put as many of these online as possible so that if you can't get to London, you can join us. If you'd like to do that, we will try our best to make that happen for you. There's a few that are already slated for online and live stream here. All of that available on the website if you click the 2020 events calendar link on the events page for booking. You can book right through online now with the new system that we've put in place. Thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. We will come back to unanswered questions directly on email. Most of the content you need is online on the R35 Hub, the Good Work Plan Hub, the Brexit Hub. If there's anything outstanding that you can't deal with there, feel free to drop me an email to neil@rec.uk.com. And have a great afternoon. Thank you, Sophie, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for joining us. All the best to you and your business.